Hi, let me walk you through the process of using the AI air-to-ground dispatcher to create a new fun air-to-ground mission scenario. I'll explain how to set up the different objects within the mission editor and how to create a Lua script using the air-to-ground dispatcher methods and its required Moose classes. So here is a predefined mission. Let's discuss the components required for the air-to-ground dispatcher and some of the items that you must set up using the mission editor. Let's take it step by step. The first component required is to set up a detection network. For that, you'll need reconnaissance vehicles or aircraft. We'll try vehicles first. In the mission editor, we have a Wrecker vehicle with the name Wrecker 1. Note that the prefix of this name, Wrecker, will be important for the scripting. You'll need a vehicle with some good detection capabilities, and also the position in the landscape is important. It needs line of sight to the enemy. For this reason, we've placed the vehicle at a higher terrain. So let's switch to the Lua editor and make our first lines of the script. I got here an empty script. So first let's create a new instance of the air-to-ground dispatcher class and we'll name the object A2G Blue. You notice that the new method of the class requires to provide a detection object. Moose has different detection classes that you can use. We'll use here the detection areas class and we'll name this new object detection blue. The detection class new method requires two parameters, a set group object and a detection zone range number. The set group object is a collection of groups that are defined in the mission editor that will define the detection network. The zone range is the range in meters that defines the diameter of the area around the detected objects. As you know, this range parameter is very important. The larger the area range, the larger the areas, and less areas will be defined. But the larger the area where targets will be grouped into, and thus less precision will be there in the attack. The smaller the areas, the more areas, and thus the attacks will be more precise, but also more overhead will be for the dispatcher to coordinate the activities. So let's define the set group of Wrecker groups first. We'll call this new object Wrecker Blue, which is then also the first parameter of the detection areas new method. Remember that I've defined Wrecker with the prefix Wrecker in the mission editor. We use a method filter prefixes to select these groups starting with the name Wrecker, and then a method filter start to start the filtering. Thus, as a result, Wrecker Blue will now contain all the groups starting with the name Wrecker. Now we define the detection areas range. We'll set it to about 5 kilometers. Note that the range is expressed in meters. So now we have a complete detection network set up. So let's take the next component of the mission. the defense point or coordinate. For that, we need to have a coordinate somewhere in the mission as a reference. I've set up a command center group, and this group can then be used to retrieve the coordinate in the Lua scripting. I've placed the coordinate on the Gudaute airbase, so any enemy approaching this defense point location will be attacked when it is detected by the detection network. Note, the name of the command center is command in capital letters. In our script, we are now finding a group object which was created at mission start by Moose, using the find by name method and using the command name as the find criteria. The return group object then has the method getCoordinate to retrieve the coordinate object pointing to the location of the group within the mission landscape. That coordinate can then be given as a parameter to indicate the defense coordinate to the AI dispatcher. The method addDefenseCoordinate can be used of the dispatcher object to set the defense coordinate. Okay, so now we have a detection network and a defense coordinate. Let's now define a defense squadron. Squadrons require templates to be defined within your mission editor. Aircraft or helicopters with late activation on and with a defined payload and skin. A squadron can consist out of more templates. In this case, we have defined here 2 Apaches with different payloads and also with different names. In our script, we now use these template names to refer to the group templates. We use the method setSquadron of the dispatcher to set up a new squadron. Each squadron must have a unique name. Squadrons are allocated at an airbase. Squadrons have templates, as explained earlier. We use a list syntax to provide more template names. And a squadron can have a limited amount of resources. In this case, we'll define about 6 helicopters within the squadron. So now we have a squadron, but we still need to provide what this squadron is going to do. Remember, we have 3 task types that squadrons can execute: Seed, CAS and BAI. Each task type has a respective method. The method setSquadronBAI is the one we'll choose here. The task BAI is required because of the lack of presence of friendlies within the vicinity. So our squadron does not really need precision weapons. But for our convenience, we've chosen to use some Hellfires first. Let's take a look at the method. We first need to provide the name of the squadron. Then we need to define the engage speed. There are 2 parameters, the minimum engage speed and the maximum engage speed. A random value will be chosen at mission runtime between these 2 values. You can look up the maximum speed of the aircraft by using the mission editor. Just fill in a large number of the speed within the box and you'll see that the maximum speed will appear. That speed is in kilometers per hour, so be careful if you're working with miles per hour. Do a conversion. The next two parameters are the altitude. Again, a minimum and a maximum. So a random altitude will be selected at mission runtime. Be creative. When you choose a low altitude, your aircraft will have less chance to be detected by radar installations. The higher the altitude, the better line of sight and the better its sensors will detect enemy targets and will go for attack. However, it will also be more vulnerable to enemy attack of the enemies. There is another important parameter that we may not forget to set, and that's the set defense radius. This radius is important because it defines the maximum range from where an enemy target will be engaged upon by a squadron around a defense point. So ensure that you selectively define this radius in a realistic range. Could be 500 kilometers, 100 kilometers, or in our case we'll set it to 70 kilometers. The next is the set defense reactivity, which is basically a reactivity of the squadrons when they will engage. So the closer the enemy gets to the defense point, the higher the probability will be that your squadron will start engaging the enemy. Now, if you set the defense reactivity too high, then the probability will be very high that a squadron will start engaging the enemy from very far away, meaning in this case the 70 kilometer boundary. If you set it to medium, it will be less likely that the enemy will be engaged from far away. And low would really mean that the enemy would be engaged when the enemy is rather close to the defense point. The next topic that I really want to configure is the behavior at takeoff. You know there are 4 patterns of takeoff, as explained in the previous video. Each takeoff pattern has a method defined. You can take off right within the air, you can take off from the runway, you can take off from a hot spot at the airbase, or from a cold spot, again at the airbase. As explained in the video, each takeoff pattern has its risks, but also its wow factor. And it also will influence the speed of your mission. We're going to select here a takeoff right within the air. Same for landing. Each landing pattern has its specific methods. There are 3 landing patterns: landing near the airbase, landing when the aircraft touches the runway at landing, or landing meaning the aircraft will disappear when it has parked at the parking spot and goes for engine shutdown. The last parameter or the last method that I would need to explain is the debug panel. During mission execution, the air-to-ground dispatcher can provide information on what it is actually doing. So we're going to use this panel so that you can follow the detection of the enemies and the engagement of the squadrons. It will show you which squadrons are engaging which enemies.
We also need to set up a overhead parameter. So the overhead parameter is important to ensure that the squadron has an efficient attack formation. So 0.25 is a good value. It would launch one helicopter for 4 targets detected.
So let's play. So within this mission we got our BMPs ready, we got our recce and our command center set up, and BMPs will follow the route, will be detected by the recce, and the action will follow. A bit further within the mission, the recce is picking up the targets and action is planned for. Defensive action has been taken and 3 Apaches are approaching the BMPs and plan their attack. The helicopters will position them around 5 kilometers from the target and will engage with long distance precision weapons. Right, so that was interesting. Now I'm going to extend the mission a bit. I'm going to put an airborne AFAC and a helicopter, which will detect targets from around a kilometer altitude, which provides a much better visibility on the battle area. And I'm placing some BMPs a bit further and some Buk to have air defenses in place. Because there are new units, the Buks, they will be detected by the reconnaissance airborne aircraft as radar emitting units. So here I'm placing some seat airplanes that will have seat missiles to attack those Buks automatically through the air-to-ground dispatcher. I've placed the Buk units a bit further away within the mission to ensure that the seat aircraft have time to pick up the radar emitter and launch the seat missiles. Next, what I've done here is I've copied the section of Squadron 1, make them Squadron 2, and place in simply the new aircraft as part of the Squadron 2, which will take off in Guduata. The next thing is the speed of the airplane. The maximum speed of the Su-25T is around 950 kilometers per hour. So within the script I'm gonna make the speed between, let's say, 600 and 900 kilometers per hour. And I'm gonna let the approach altitude between 1000 and 2000 meters. I'm also going to adapt the overhead to 0.5. Okay, so I'm back in the mission now. You see the AFAC airborne detecting targets just starting up on its path, and soon it will detect the radar emitters a bit further away and the seat aircraft will launch. The ground-based reconnaissance vehicle will detect the BMPs approaching, and for that the BAI defenses will actually be engaged. Now you see while the Apaches are approaching and engaging on the BMPs, you see a new area too that is containing the new seat installations that are being detected by the airborne AFAC.